Good evening and welcome to our Wednesday night study. Let's get right into the news this week. It's kind of interesting. I want to give a little couple news items from Israel that has happened this week. This one says this: new Gallup poll, most Democrats side with the Palestinians other than with Israel. A newly released Gallup survey reported that 49% of Democrats responded that their sympathies lie with the Palestinians, as compared to 38% who favored Israel. And this is starting to switch quite a bit, and I'll tell you why. It represents an increase of 11% in support of the Palestinians among Democrats in just this last year alone. At the same time, the percentages sympathizing more with the Israelis has dropped and dipped to very new lows. In comparison to 2016, 53% of Democrats said they sympathize more with the Israelis. So why such a switch? Well, Republicans still favor Israel by a wide margin. 78% of Republicans continue to sympathize with Israel. This represents a shift towards Israel over the past year for the Republicans and a shift away from the Palestinians. Gallup concluded that this dramatic drop in Democratic sympathy for Israel, wait to hear this, correlates to a decreasing religiosity among the demographic. Democrats' waning religiosity may be a factor in the longer-term trend. Sympathy for Israel has historically been high and highly correlated with religion, with those attending religious services weekly being much more sympathetic to the Israelis than those who seldom or never attend. So, my question is, do you still want to be a Democrat? Then you just lost your blessing that's given in Genesis. I will bless those who bless you, and you've gained a curse. I will curse those who curse you. Interesting trend. Next item I want to give you is based on the economy, and this one should be caution to all of us. We should have our ears up on this one. I've said this many times about our economy, but now we're starting to see some major cracks. 186 more banks are at risk. This crisis is far from over. They're desperately trying to plug one leak in the system after another. But what happens if the entire system suddenly comes crashing down all around them? We are now in the midst of the most severe banking crisis since 2008, and it could soon get a whole lot worse. Now, one of the reasons why people don't readily look at these things or even pay attention, because it doesn't seem to be happening to them. But make no mistake, there's something happening behind the scenes that we all need to be aware of. We've already witnessed the second and third largest bank failures in the entire history of the United States. And now it's being reported that another 186 banks are at risk of failure. Think of this. If you have money in a bank, you may want to think about this. This is because the Federal Reserve's aggressive interest rate hikes to tamp down inflation have eroded the value of bank assets, such as government bonds and mortgage-backed securities. You know what that means. The more money you print, the less the money's worth. A coalition of mid-sized U.S. banks asked the federal regulators to extend FDIC insurance to all deposits for the next 2 years, arguing the guarantee is needed to avoid a wider run on the banks. If federal regulators don't do this, vast amounts of money will continue to be transferred from small and mid-sized banks to the too-big-to-fail banks. So understand what's happening here. There's a lot of small banks in the world, in the United States. There's several very large banks. Well, if there's a run on the small banks because people don't trust the feds or don't trust the economy, they're going to take their money out of the small banks and put them into the big banks, which will cause those small banks to fail. If every bank account in America is suddenly fully guaranteed by the federal government, there'll be a giant sucking sound as wealthy individuals will pull their money out of the European banks, where large balances are not insured. So it's another side to this. If we insure all of our banks, then we're going to have an inflow of cash coming in. It may sound good, it's not. European banking system is already teetering on the brink of collapse. Switzerland's biggest bank, UBS, has agreed to buy its ailing rival Credit Suisse in an emergency rescue deal aimed at stemming financial market panic unleashed by the failure of two American banks earlier this month. So to protect foreign banks, small and mid-sized banks, in the U.S., small ones will be allowed to fail. But if a larger number of small and mid-sized banks start failing, this country will rapidly plunge into an economic nightmare. Along the same lines, let me give you another article from this week. The FedNow, FEDNOW, instant payments coming this summer. First step to digital currency. I've been saying this for a long time. Now we see some things in the workings. There's absolutely no doubt that our financial system is in flux right now, as I've just shared an article with you. We're watching a storm approach, and it's about to envelop the entire nation in chaotic conditions. If you think things are crazy now, just hang on to your halo. It's about to get a whole lot worse. They're not calling it CBDCs, that's central bank digital currencies, not yet. But FedNow will be launched in July of this year. So what is FedNow? On March 15th, in the midst of the banking collapses, the Federal Reserve issued a press release detailing a new instant payment system that will be launched in July. That system is called FedNow. Here's what they said about it. The first week of April, the Federal Reserve will begin the formal certification of participants for a launch of the new service. Early adopters will complete a customer testing and certification program, informed by feedback from the FedNow pilot program, to prepare for sending live transactions through the system. Let me just keep going so you can get the gist of this. The Fed said we couldn't be more excited about the forthcoming FedNow launch, which will enable every participating financial institution, the smallest bank to the largest, and from all corners of the country, to offer a modern instant payment solution, said Ken Montgomery, first vice president of the Federal Reserve Bank of Boston. This has all the hallmarks of a government strategy. First, they offer it as a convenience or a safety measure. Lots of people jump on board in order to take advantage of it. Eventually, you won't be able to purchase anything without being a participant. The Federal Reserve banks are developing the FedNow service to facilitate nationwide reach of instant payment services by financial institutions. Again, regardless of size or geographic location, around the clock, every day, 365 days out of the year. Institutions participating in the FedNow service, business and individuals will be able to send and receive instant payments any time of the day. And recipients will have full access to funds immediately, giving them greater flexibility to manage their money and make time-sensitive payments. That sounds great, doesn't it? It sounds wonderful. You can get all your money whenever you want it. You don't have to wait a couple days. You can have instant payment, instant credit. But it's not the digital dollar yet. This in itself is not the implementation of the CBDCs. Instead, it's the payment network needed to implement CBDCs. An infrastructure in a manner of speaking, if you will. This is just a system that allows payments to be made via a federal government network. Notice those words, federal government network, using existing banks. That means the feds are going to be involved in all banking transactions. FedNow could quickly lead to FedCoin, which would be a cryptocurrency. And it wouldn't take much effort at all. And by the way, if that happens, you could forget about buying a gun because they'd forbid you to do it. And they could lock up your money so you couldn't. There's a precedent for federal payments networks turning into federal digital currency. Digital identity service that is funded by the U.S. is being used right now in the Ukraine. And Asian countries like India and China are leading the sector, with the United States slightly late to join the club. India employs a payment infrastructure based on what's called Immediate Payment Service, IMPS, to offer instant payment services to customers and merchants. India has expanded its e-rupee, a pilot as a part of its CBDC trials. China, which ranks second in that category, has widely used Alipay for instant mobile payments. The nation has also pushed to adopt a digital yuan. Do you notice that's all going digital? As its centrally backed digital currency. So to be clear, they instituted an instant payment service, then a federal digital currency shortly followed thereafter. Here's what the Department of Treasury says about CBDCs. It has a working group exploring the feasibility of the project. It's coming, my friends, and they're being completely open about it. Here's some information from the Department of Treasury website. CBDC is one of several options for upgrading the legacy capabilities of central bank money. In other words, the federal government is looking into making a one currency, and it'll be a cryptocurrency owned by the federal government. In the United States, policymakers are continuing to deliberate about whether to have a CBDC, and if so, what form it would take. According to the Atlantic Council Tracker, 114 countries, representing over 95% of global GDP, are exploring CBDCs. Can you say one world currency, one world economy, can't buy or can't sell? Global currency, anyone? Here's what has to happen to make it widely accepted. The banking crisis of the past few weeks feels like part of the plan. To make CBDCs widely accepted and even welcome, a few things have to happen first. They have to offer it as a convenience, and lots of people will jump on board as it promises a safety measure. Next, it will be pushed by the feds. Anyone not participating will be mocked, kind of like the thing they did with the vaccine. Then it will be near impossible to do anything without it. It's coming, my friend, a one world currency. And John saw it in Revelation about 2,000 years ago. Let's go a little further in the news today. Let's talk about war. And you can't talk about war anymore without talking about China. China's technology is leaving the world behind. The United States and other Western countries are losing a race war with China to develop advanced technologies and retain talent. The Australian Strategy Policy Institute reported that out of 44 technologies tracked, China leads the world in 37 of them, such as electric batteries, hypersonics, and advanced radio frequency communications, such as 5G and 6G. The US leads in just 7 of the remaining technologies. The critical technology tracker shows that, for some technologies, all of the world's top 10 leading research institutions are based in China and are collectively generating 9 times more high-impact research papers than the second-ranked country, which is the United States. The report went on to warn that China has the potential of developing a monopoly in 8 of the technology areas. We're already dependent on China for our pharmaceuticals. Now it's 8 of the 10 major technologies that they will control. Scientific research and development has long been a domain where the United States has been the global leader. But in recent decades, the nation has lost much of that advantage as China steadily and intentionally focuses its attentions in this area. Bible prophecy has long foretold that due to their arrogance and rejection of his laws, God will break the pride of the power of nations, including the United States. That's Leviticus 26. He also warned that nations see their power wane, other nations will, quote, rise higher and higher. That's Deuteronomy 28:43. You maybe remember a long time ago I told you about the Thucydides effect. Thucydides was a Greek philosopher who said that any nation that's number 1 will also be challenged by the number 2 and number 3 nation and will eventually be destroyed by that nation. It's happened 8 times in the history of our planet. The rise of China in this area and the decline of America should be no surprise to Bible prophecy students. Let me give you this one. Under religion, Biden moves to reverse a campus religious freedom rule. The Biden administration is days away from revoking a federal regulation defending religious liberty on campus, even though critics say the president has offered no evidence that religious students groups may not lose their First Amendment rights as a result. The Religious Liberty and Free Inquiry Final Rule, written in 2019 by the Trump administration, allows the federal government to withhold some or all federal aid to any college that does not give religious students groups the same accommodations as other students' organizations strictly because of their faith. Now Biden wants to take that away. Now Biden wants to say that you can ban religious organizations and it's not infringing on their rights. Well, of course it's infringing on their rights. With free speech and religious freedom under attack on colleges and campuses across America, we need the protections provided by the Trump era rule more than ever. Religious student groups on university campuses, including religious minorities, too often face the risk of being shut down or canceled by fellow students or school officials for expressing sincerity held beliefs perceived to be controversial. So obviously you know what this is going. It's the woke nation again. They want to eliminate any Christian thought of what it means to be a male and a female, what it means to be married to a male married to a female. So Biden is playing right along with it. Multiple Supreme Court cases already mandate that religious organizations receive equal access to publicly funded goods and services the government provides to the general public. Sadly, universities are increasingly becoming hostile places to express your beliefs, especially those that are informed by a biblical worldview, says FRC Action Petition. It is vital that we show the Biden administration that we will not accept religious discrimination in higher education. It stuns me as I see this administration continue to put its shotgun and its aim on religion and religious institutions and everything that we stand for. We can see it's a satanic plot and it's deep rooted. Washington is awash with it. And basically we need some difference and some change that's going to happen there. Hopefully we'll be able to see it. Along with change and difference, that's Pope Francis. Let me give you my opinion. This is one of the scariest men on the planet when it comes to religion. He's under fire now for comments denying the existence of hell. In an interview to mark his 10-year anniversary, Pope Francis appeared to deny the existence of hell, saying this: quote, it's not a place, but instead simply a state of mind or a state of the heart and a posture towards life. The pontiff's comments formed part of a lengthy conversation conducted by the Argentinian news site Perfil. As part of the in-depth discussion, Francis was asked, what is your interpretation of hell and paradise? And what happens to people who go to hell? And what happens to those who go to paradise? Giving his trademark lengthy, convoluted answer, somewhat evasive, Francis appeared to deny the existence of hell as an actual place. He said, quote, hell is not a place. Then he said, if one goes to attend the Last Judgment and sees the face of those who go to hell, one gets scared. If you read Dante, you get scared. But these are media representations. By the way, it's convoluted, it's evasive, and it's jibberjash. I think him and Biden went to the same college. Expanding on his answer, Francis described hell simply as a state, a reference to a state of mind. He said, hell is a state. There are people who live in hell continually right here. It's a state of the heart, he said, of the soul, of posture towards life, towards values, towards the family, towards everything. No content with appearing to deny the existence of hell, however. Francis implied that there was no one actually in hell. Hell has nobody in it. So I'm not sure where Hitler is right now, but he's not in hell, according to Francis. If you ask me how many people are in hell, he said, I answer with a famous sculpture, God forbid he uses scripture, a famous sculpture of the cathedral at Vézelay. He said, providing a description of the sculpture, Francis noted that the sculptor, quote, has Judas hanging and the devil pulling him down, and on the other side, they have the good shepherd, Jesus, who grabs Judas and puts him on his shoulders with an ironic smile. By the way, that statue is a blasphemy. Jesus said to Judas at the Last Supper that he was going to his own place and to do his thing. So Francis is way off. Now, I grew up as a Catholic, maybe some of you did too. This is totally against Catholic doctrine. Pope Francis' earnest attempt to deny the existence of hell or the possibility of anybody being in it runs in the face of the Catholic Church's teaching on this subject for thousands of years. The Gospels present the words of Christ on the matter. In the parable of Lazarus and the rich man, we were just talking about this before we started our study tonight, Christ warns how greedy and selfish rich man is who died unrepentant, also died, and he was buried in hell. That's Luke 16:22. So also in St. Matthew's Gospel, Christ presents the account of Judgment Day and the separation of the just from the unjust. Those who did not follow the law of God, quote, shall go into everlasting punishment, teaches Christ. Matthew 25:46. Christ explained the meaning of the parable of the sower. Quote, the Son of Man shall send his angels. They shall gather out the kingdoms, all scandals, and them that work iniquity. Shall cast them into the furnace of fire. There shall be weeping and gnashing of teeth. Matthew 13:41. Let me add that Jesus spoke 3 times as much about hell as he did about heaven. St. Thomas reaffirms the physical existence of hell. St. Basil, Aquinas further states the teaching of Pope St. Gregory, along with that of St. Augustine, to support his writing that there is a literal hell. The Church Fathers understood Jesus' description of hell as being a literal description of a physical place. Pope Francis' caricature of hell as being a psychological state is yet another example of an idolatrous humanism that reduces everything to this world as if man's experience is the measure of God, rather than God's eternal design and plan as being the measure of man's destiny. Pope Francis' offhand dismissal of our Lord's description of the physicality of hell is yet another example of his dethronement of the true God for his one of his own making. He's making his own God up. You know, they say that the Pope is the vicar of Christ, the representation of Christ. I don't think so. In my opinion, he's more like the vicar of confusion. If this man isn't the false prophet, man, he is actually opening up the door for the cab and calling the cab for the one who is. Let me give you this one under moral decay. Biden believes opposing his radical gender ideology is, quote, close to sinful. You know, I'm blown away with these articles. So the Pope tells us there's no hell, and now we have Biden talking about it's sinful to warn children about gender ideology. So who makes both of these guys theologians? They're not. Neither one of them are. Protecting children from premature, harmful exposure to gender ideology and its life-altering consequences is, Biden said, close to sinful. He said it Monday on The Daily Show. The remark came as Biden searched for language strong enough to describe Florida's recent efforts to protect children. He also called it terrible and cruel. President Biden said, and I'm quoting, What's going on in Florida is, as my mother would say, close to sinful, all right? I mean, it's just terrible what they're doing. We should have elected Biden's mother and father. It seems every time I hear this guy talk, he's talking about his father, his mother. Does he have a law degree? Does he have any idea of what it means to preside over the greatest country in the world? It's not like a kid just wakes up one morning, he says, and says, I've decided I want to become a man, or I want to become a woman, or I want to change. I mean, what are they thinking about here? I mean, human beings, Biden, they love, they hate, they have feelings, they have inclinations that are, it just to me is, I don't know, it's cruel. Mainstream media publications like The Hill connected Biden's remarks to the recently introduced Florida House Bill 1421, which states that, quote, a physician, this is Florida, may not perform or provide gender clinical interventions to a minor, including sex rearrangement, reassignment surgeries, or any other surgical procedure that alters primary or secondary sexual characteristics and puberty blocking hormone or hormonal antagonistic therapies. Florida Governor Ron DeSantis responded, it is not sinful to prohibit the mutilation of minors. Man, I wonder what planet we're on sometimes when we hear Biden or the Pope. By the way, his comments made news for the mismatch between his undeserved, barely coherent insults and the state's stellar track record. Biden doesn't know what he's talking about. First, the theological aspect. Close to sinful is not a biblical category. Let me give you my opinion. It's like almost pregnant. You're either sinful or you're not sinful. It's not close to sinful. Instead, the Bible says sin clings so closely to us that we must struggle against it in Hebrews. Sin is also lawlessness, 1 John tells us. Failing to do what we know is right, James 4. And whatever does not proceed from faith, Romans 14. In the Bible's account, anything that isn't righteous is sinful. And it doesn't make sense to call righteousness close to sinful. From his perspective, support from common sense legislation like Florida House Bill 1421 is tantamount to a moral wrong that ought to be opposed. Perhaps close to sinful was Biden's mother's and his shorthand way of saying, the church doesn't say this is wrong, but I think it is. So who makes him the moral guide for America? Ironically, the Florida bill, not the president's position, is in line with historic Christian sexual ethics and a biblical understanding of sex and gender. Jennifer Bowens, director of the FRC Center for Family Studies, called attention to Biden's claim that children don't wake up one morning and decide they identify as transgender. Not true, she said. That's exactly what's happening. The way these kids get pulled into gender ideology is very different than it was when perhaps 10 years ago. We can see that from a spiritual standpoint, she said, there's some kind of wave sweeping over this land, over our nation. Yeah, it's a demonic wave. Now watch this. We're supposed to be civilized in the West. More than 30 of Africa's 54 nations have laws against engaging in homosexual relations, according to the Associated Press. That list includes Nigeria, which the Biden administration removed as a country of particular concern despite intensifying persecution of Christians. The State Department held a tense confrontation with Ugandan President Yoweri Museveni about the country's LGBTQ laws last December 14th, one day after Biden signed the so-called Respect for Marriage Act. We are not going to follow people who are lost, said President Museveni, referring to Americans and others in the West during a rally in Uganda this past month. He added, the Western leaders don't respect other people's views. They want to turn the abnormal into normal and force it on others. We shall not agree. These are African nations. His remarks came as Uganda's parliament introduced a bill banning the promotion, recruitment, and funding of LGBTQ actions and advocacy. It makes me want to move to Africa. We do not support gay and lesbian rights as a country, said Zambian President Hakainde Hichilema. So in Nigeria, constitutional lawyer Dayo Akinlaja said the threat of Western sanctions, we're sanctioning Nigeria because they won't promote LGBTQ. He said sanctions should not deter us from abhorring what we consider to be an immoral and sinful act, because the law should reflect our culture and our values. We cannot repeal our law to reflect the American way of life. Wow. Yet Biden administration is expected to continue its pressure for the global LGBTQ agenda when Vice President Kamala Harris visits Africa. I wonder if she knows where it is. from March 25th to April 2nd. And she is scheduled to meet with the presidents of Ghana, Tanzania, and Zambia. I hope her laugh and her cackle is in order, because they're going to laugh and cackle at her, because they are very, very pro-family and against LGBTQ. Let's go a little bit further and talk about New York and Florida. This article says, between red and blue states, the divide drags on. New York and Florida may be 1,000 miles apart, but that doesn't begin to describe the distance between them in leadership. By the way, this is one of the better articles I've read today. This week. The best illustration of that may have been this week, when Florida Governor Ron DeSantis made headlines for punishing a kids' drag event, and New York Attorney General Letitia James decided to host one. If you want to know why New York is bleeding residents and Florida is the fastest growing state in America, look no further. Even in the permissive Big Apple, the idea that New York's top law enforcer was heading up a drag queen story hour caught plenty of people off guard. On her Instagram page, James posted, "My office is proud to host a drag story hour, readathon on Sunday," and explained that other elected leaders would also be in attendance. The event was also endorsed by 11 Democrats in addition to James, 6 city council members, 4 assemblymen, 1 state senator. As Ashley St. Clair tweeted, the family-friendly event will take place at the Lesbian, Gay, Bisexual, and Transgender Community Center. And then she had the nerve to say this, "Your tax dollars are hard at work grooming kids." Man, that's so blatant, it's right out in the open. Why? Why? The New York Young Republican Club's Matt Antar asked, "What's the purpose of government-funded drag queens for children? To teach tolerance?" He says that's BS. Political commentator Steve Cortez was equally outraged, insisting this kind of explicit targeting of children is pure evil. Others, like Alexander Ferrer, can't understand the obsession with bringing kids into the mix in the first place. He said this, "Grown-ups want to dress in drag? Go for it, more power to you. But this fascination with wanting people to bring their kids to your drag show is downright evil." Meanwhile, in the land of sanity, Florida, Governor DeSantis was painting a decidedly different picture. His office just announced this week that the State Department of Business and Professional Regulation have filed a formal complaint against the Hyatt Regency Hotel in Miami. According to the statement, the hotel ignored the state's warning not to host their annual Christmas-themed drag show for kids. As a result, the Hyatt is facing an enormously painful penalty: the loss of any hospitality venue greatest asset, its liquor license. That's right, DeSantis is going to pull the liquor license from the Hyatt Regency because they are doing a drag show for kids. Man, I think everybody should move to Florida. I think the United States is going to be drained of people, and we're all going to be living in Florida. DeSantis' office explained that the department is revoking the venue's license. They took it away for the sale of consumption of alcoholic beverages. Good for them. Statement added, "Sexually explicit content is not appropriate to display to children, and doing so violates Florida law. Governor DeSantis stands up for the innocence of children in the classroom and throughout Florida." So when you compare 2 responses to an agenda that an overwhelming majority of the country opposes, it's no wonder that 500,000 people have already run from the exits in New York. They've lost 500,000 people. Maybe parents are fleeing the morally stagnant swamps and looking for higher ground, family research counselor Quina Gonzalez told the Washington Stand. Maybe that's why California and New York keep losing people to Texas, Florida, and Tennessee. In some states, the government determines where your child can go to school, what they learn, if their genitals should be cut off, whether they should be exposed to partially dressed dancing men. In other states, governments will protect the rights of parents to make those decisions. Different worldviews are creating very different worlds within our nation. Man, some interesting articles today. Let me give this one on the planet. If you're an evolutionist or a cosmologist, you may want to close your ears to this because it's going to disprove all of the years of you trying to push Darwinism and evolution. Scientists puzzled by structures in the universe. According to a central tenet of the study of the universe, known as the cosmological principle, on a large scale, the universe should look roughly the same everywhere, no matter where your position or direction in which you're looking. Now, let me explain that. Knowing a bit about cosmology, our universe has galaxies in it. We're in the Milky Way galaxy, our solar system. Galaxies are expanding. The whole universe is expanding. So galaxies are moving further away from each other and not closer to each other. Any place in the universe you go, you'll see that. But something else is they're starting to see. There should be no giant structures because they're all moving away. Rather, space should be smooth and uniform. That's what evolutionists and cosmologists have believed for decades. However, recent findings reveal a massive arc-shaped ribbon of galaxies that span roughly 1/15 of the radius of the observable universe, a distance of 3.3 billion light years. This giant arc has thrown into question some of the most fundamental assumptions about the universe and how it formed. Plus, the giant arc is not the only structure of its kind. Such arrangements of the cosmos are forcing scientists to reevaluate their theories about the formation of the universe. The probability that this arc-shaped structure formed by chance, which they think the whole universe did, formed by chance, has been estimated by scientists to be, now listen, 0.0003%. And to add insult to injury, according to the standard model, structures like the giant arc simply wouldn't have had time to form as a result of any known natural process. According to one author, if more structures like the giant arc and Hercules Corona Borealis Great Wall, another giant of these giant structures, are proven to exist, and we know they exist, we have pictures of them, astronomers will be forced to rewrite or at least revise the standard model of cosmology and evolution. According to the current scientific theories, these massive, clearly distinguishable galactic structures should not be able to exist. Because of this, one scientist posited that they, quote, may have formed due to something in the natural physics of the universe that we currently don't account for. Yeah, it's called God. Indeed, there is much in the formation of the universe many scientists do not account for, including an intelligent architect of the heavens. As the Apostle Paul noted, for since the creation of the world, his invisible attributes are clearly seen, being understood that by the things that are made, even his eternal power and Godhead, so that they are without excuse. Romans 1. We are seeing the creature that God has created, that's what it's saying, is looking at things he's done, and they can see it, and that's what we're seeing. When one assumes that creation is an accident, subject only to observable mindless laws of physics and chemistry, one has to assume things will only occur without purpose, without intention, or without design. But when you consider that creation demands a creator, you remain open to a possibility. Scientists back themselves into a corner when they reject facts that point to a creator. There's another article, I have the picture. This is Russell Wilson. He is an NFL quarterback. Him and his wife went into I forgot which state he is at. Somebody may want to help me there. But he and his wife went into a federal prison and led 300 inmates to the Lord this past weekend. So God is still doing something. In spite of all these negative things we hear in the news, God is active, he's alive. When the enemy steps up, let me tell you something, he cannot play the A game with God. God has an A game way beyond the enemies.